Welcome to Cream, Eggs and Jam,
a podcast for food nerds with show and tell by Elise Burke and Scott Bagnell.
We love to cook with cream, eggs and jam and learn from food people who give a damn.
So join us each week for thoughts, tips and tricks with guests, recipes and more in the mix.
Scotty, we are more than halfway through our podcast season.
Amazing. How many episodes are we actually doing for this season? I don't think I've been keeping track.
I anticipated that we'd do 12.
12.
So
yeah,
if we were
that's a nice
doing 12,
number.
we're over halfway, yeah.
Maybe we should do 13. It's like a baker's dozen.
Oh, everyone loves the baker's dozen. That's the donut that goes
get
missing
one
before
for
you get
free.
home. Yeah. Anyway, hello, I'm Elise Burke and I'm coming to you today from Wurundjeri country.
And I'm Scott Bagnell and I'm coming to you from Yagara country. And we'd like to start this week by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording this podcast and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Mm-hmm. Scotty, today we are talking cheese.
Hello, gooey, delicious, golden cheese.
Mm-hmm. Now,
excited.
if you listened to the episode, I think it was episode 5, that we produced the week after my 30th birthday, you would know that Scotty and I spent quite a lot of time at a shop called Ripe. It's at the Queen Victoria Market and we were there for way too long, tasting way too many cheeses. And then, you know, I definitely burst the budget buying whole wheels because I love big pieces of cheese. I just want to sink my face into them. So later in today's episode, we will be interviewing the lovely Hakim, who is the founder and owner of Ripe.
I can't wait to talk to Hakim. He is a cheese nerd. He's on our level of nerdiness and he's going to give us some great tips and tricks for storing cheese, eating cheese, devouring cheese, cooking with cheese, all of the cheese. And I can't wait.
I'm hungry for cheese right now. I just want a glass of red wine or a really nice herbal tea with honey.
Yes.
A sage and mint tea with honey goes very well with cheese. I'll tell you that one.
No, I need wine. Always wine. A nice vermouth, I think. It's a bit cool in Brisbane today, so a nice vermouth, something a bit herbaceous, a creamy brie, some ginger nut biscuits. Hello.
Oh, how about that cheese, the extravagant that we bought? My gosh. I think that's one of my favourite all-time cheeses that I've ever had. And I want it again in my fridge immediately. I just keep thinking about going back to the Queen Vic Market to get more of it. It's creamier than any creamy cheese you've ever had. Think French Delise,
Like the
level.
Dauphinois, but like next level Dauphinois.
And Australian, which is also a big, big, big plus. We need to be celebrating Australian cheesemakers, and that's what we intend to do in this episode.
And we're talking to Burke Brandon from Prom Country Cheese, a cheese maker from Gippsland in Victoria. That is going to be amazing. I can't wait to ask him some questions on all of the complexities of making cheese.
Cheese. Isn't it a great word? Cheese.
Such a good word.
Cheese. Say it 10 times just to hear how weird it does sound when you say it a few times.
It does,
cheese.
doesn't it? Cheese.
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 Cheese. Cheese. Cheese. Why do they say cheese when you're like having a photograph?
It
Where did
shows
that
your
come
teeth.
from?
Cheese.
Okay, fair enough.
Now, Scotty, before we delve into ooey gooey cheese,
Yes.
what was the challenge on Masterchef on Sunday night that saw one of the favourites, Harry, eliminated?
You mean you didn't watch it?
Oh, look, I just watched the highlights.
You.
Oh, no.
It's so on brand.
It's so on brand. If you listen to this podcast, you know that Scotty has to update me about what happens on MasterChef because I can't watch it anymore. A certain experience in 2021 has traumatized me for the rest of my life. Anyway,
What
happened, Scotty?
I think I'd be traumatized if I was in this episode. That's for sure, because Marco Pierre White was in the room, and he has this presence, doesn't he? I think I'm a bit sad that all of these amazing chefs are walking through the door, and we lacked a lot of real life chefs in the room with us during
real life anxiety. No. It was all anxiety provoking regardless. Oh no.
Yes, but Marco Pierre White, like, he has to be like the number one chef in the world, isn't he? Like,
Yeah, something like that.
He's
you know
up
what I
there.
thought was interesting? Around this time last year, there was an article about Jock, and there was a quote by Marco Pierre White that was not in favour of Jock in this particular article, and it did the rounds, and I assumed that Marco Pierre White would never appear alongside Jock ever on MasterChef, and lo and behold, he has this week. So there seems to be a bit of a juicy story in that.
Yes, and we
putting
don't
that
have
out
the
there.
details, but
Of course not.
if you have the details, let us know. Maybe we can talk about that next episode.
That's right. However,
So the challenge,
Marco, what did he do to
Marco
them?
Pierre White, it was his pantry staples. So they had to hero at least 2 of his pantry staples in a dish. They had access to the garden and the pantry. So, like, it wasn't that difficult a challenge, I thought. But it got me thinking, like, his pantry staples were, fairly basic. There was like tomato sauce and vinegar and capers, anchovies, those sorts of things. But it got me thinking what my like top 5 pantry staples are. And I would like to ask you, what's in your pantry? What are your top 5? Can you narrow it down to 5? I'm going to struggle to narrow it down to 5.
Well, yeah. I mean, I need to really think about what my favourite items are, because I share my pantry with Adam, and there are things in there that I need to make sure I purchase for his own mental health. Like like a chili sauces, for example, that I don't make from scratch. I have my own homemade fermented chili sauce in the fridge. But there are a range of hot sauces and like Asian chili oils as well that I enjoy, but Adam is the one that has them almost daily with a bit of rice or an egg or something like that. So that's in the pantry for the well-being of my partner.
I like
Suppose
it.
that's an answer. Of course, extra virgin olive oil. And these are 2 different essential pantry items. One is a very, very murky, fresh, cold-pressed olive oil that's, recently pressed. And that one there is not for cooking with. That one is for dipping bread into.
Yes, yum.
And I also would have a cheaper extra virgin olive oil that I would cook with. I cook with extra virgin olive oil. My family does. We always have. And I'd have, also a light olive oil, but I hardly use the light olive oil. So in terms of essential, I would say 2 grades of extra virgin olive oil.
I like it.
Another pantry staple, lentils.
Oh, lentils,
And
yes.
lentils are essential because they lend themselves to a quick soup using some beautiful things from my garden, or they lend themselves to a beautiful Sri Lankan spiced lentil dish that I can make quite easily with other essential pantry items, such as my my Lord and Lion Sri Lankan spice box.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably essential now. I love having it. I take it with me when I go places. And you never know what you'll need when you go away. So if you just take a whole box of spices, you might surprise yourself with, how actually useful it is.
It is good. We used your box at your birthday for making some potato cakes.
That's right. We made cutlets. We made potato and crab cutlets for breakfast, and we spiced them with some turmeric, mustard, a little bit of a roasted curry powder. So cutlets are like a patty, and we use leftover mashed potato, beautiful picked crab meat. I think we had some celery leaves. It was a matter of using what we had to make this. We had some chili and also red onion that we chopped up. We crumbed it all in some sourdough bread butts that we blitzed into a nice crummy mixture with the food processor that was at the accommodation.
So good. It was really brown and nutty, and it really made a beautiful crumb on the outside, didn't it?
Yeah, sourdough crumbs are the best. They really are. Did I say 5? Is that 5 now? Because there were 2 olive oil entries, chili oil, the
lentils,
spice box, and lentils. That's 5.
You're done.
Yeah. I'm done. They're my essentials.
Well done.
Thank you.
Oh gosh. I don't know what
And
mine
yourself.
would be. Mine are going to be really hard. And they're probably like very strange. Like not going together. My number one thing that I always like to have is like a tomato-based something. It's either a passata or a tin of tomatoes because I can do a lot of things with that. Coconut milk. It's random, but I have anxiety if I don't have any coconut milk in the cupboard because I make lots of like curries and stir fries and like Thai dishes with coconut milk and sweets and.
So how many tins do you need to have in your pantry so that you've got coconut milk security? This is a leading question.
Well, quite often I need to have 2 coconut milk, 2 coconut cream.
Okay. I'm about to change your life.
What?
You need to buy Maggi coconut milk powder. So this is what all the Sri Lankan aunties, what my nana used.
What?
And the amount of coconut milk powder that you use can change the viscosity of whatever you're making. And it can be coconut cream if you want it to be. It can be coconut milk if you want it to be. So if you're not making your own fresh coconut milk with a coconut, this is the next best thing before tins and cans.
Wow.
If you can't find it in Brisbane, let me know and I'll ship you some from Melbourne.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it.
Coconut milk powder.
Okay, I love this.
Yeah. And I use a bag maybe every 3 to 6 months.
Oh, wow. How big is the bag?
It saves so much pantry space. It's like, I can't tell you the grams. I have no idea, but I buy the big one.
Okay.
I buy whatever the biggest bag is when I can get it. Top tip.
That is so good because it takes up so much space in the pantry. Okay, so coconut milk, tomato tins, let's say tin tomatoes, pasta, like just a dried spaghetti, because I can do anything with spaghetti. Like I think for me, pantry staples are stuff that if I've forgotten to go to the shops and I need to whip something up quickly, I've got a base of something. So pasta's really good, probably a rice, and like oil, yes. My 2 oils are just a really good quality olive oil and peanut oil. They're the 2.
Wow.
They're the main 2 that I cook with. I really like peanut oil for like stir frying and cooking and frying. It gives a really nice nutty flavour.
Yeah.
And I just like the flavour it imparts.
Yeah. I haven't visited your pantry yet. You've visited mine, so you know how hectic it is.
Oh,
I'm imagining yours is...
Mine is, I've only got this tiny kitchen and it's a wall. You literally open the pantry door up and everything is chocked to the brim. It's just like this flat wall of pantry. It's an absolute nightmare.
Oh, no.
I definitely need to sort it out. The designing the kitchen is high on the to-do list.
Yes. Oh, I went into the best pantry in the world last week.
Oh, what?
Okay. I'm currently writing a cookbook, if you don't know. Scotty knows, but listener, if you don't know. And I am featuring people who love food in and around the suburb that I've grown up in and still live in. And during the day, I'll visit, anywhere between 2 to 6 households and collect recipes. Last Friday, I met a couple who I want to adopt me. They had like a candelabra made of teacups hanging from their ceiling in their lounge room.
Photo of this.
I love this couple so much. They destroyed a wall, the joining wall between a bedroom and their kitchen to extend their pantry.
Oh, yeah.
And this house didn't have a walk-in pantry, but they made one. And the bedroom has become a little like a day nook where you could have like, you know, a little rest in the middle of the day. It's a very, very, very small bedroom now that they have a walk-in pantry and it is so well organised. They have all of their pans and pots hanging on the wall like Julia Child style, if you've seen any kind of documentaries about Julia Child's, how she would hang her pans on the wall for ease and convenience. This was that. And their lighting in the pantry was fairy lights.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yes.
That is so good. Oh, wow.
Every day is magical. Every day is magical.
Why not have fun? Like, you know, in the house that you live in, have fun. Like, make it you. You don't need to impress people. I always sort of think that, you know, the place that you live should reflect your personality and you should have fun. Break rules. Do what you want. Do something outrageous. It doesn't matter. A lot of things you can change really easily. You know, some fairy lights, some colour on the wall. No one's going to get hurt.
No. Oh, anyway, they just filled me with so much joy. Adam won't let me install teacups as lights in our house. I've already discussed it.
I'll talk to him.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I've got the name of the electrician, so I'm ready to go. And of course, I've got all the teacups. But anyway.
Oh my gosh.
Oh dear. I think it's time to jump into our chat with Hakim. What do you think, Scotty?
It's cheese time. I'm ready.
It's cheese time. Woohoo. Hakim, what made you become a cheese nerd?
What made me become a cheese nerd? So, how far do you want to go back?
At what point did you think I'm going to open a cheese shop?
Right. So, I grew up really loving food, right? And I grew up in Singapore. I mean, the only cheese that I had growing up was Kraft singles on toast and sugar. I grew up eating that. It was a bit gross, but that's what I grew up. And then 12 years ago, when I moved to Melbourne, I had my first taste of cheese, and I went to my local service station and got myself a packet of Coons, a packet of Jets crackers, and some IXL jam.
Oh, wow.
And that was my first cheese platter that I did. And that pretty much sealed the deal for me that this is what I love.
Wow.
How
times have changed.
How times have changed, I know. And then about 4 years ago, I was a marketer. I was a digital marketer, and I just got a bit tired of being in an office. You know, I mean, like in Masterchef, you guys talk about your food dream. And that was like the beginning of me realizing that I can't be in an office in front of a computer anymore. So me loving cheese, we got our first deli, Bill's Farm, also at a Queen Vic Market. And then 2.5 years ago, we founded which is the all Australian cheese shop in the country. Wow. So it's just a slow progression from starting from my Kraft singles and sugar to my Coons cheddar to eating so much dairy and cheese in the last 12 years that I developed an intolerance to lactose.
Oh no!
I know. I'm an Asian Singaporean lactose intolerant cheesemonger.
I bet there's not too many people that have that same qualification.
I don't think so. I don't think I see myself as really unique. So I think that's why people kind of laugh and enjoy our chats. My story, yeah.
In your journey of eating so much cheese, how did you arrive at the concept of a cheese shop that would only sell Australian cheeses?
Well, because while I was at Bill's Farm, right? Bill's Farm is the deli that we bought 4 years ago, and it specializes in international produce. You know, things from Europe, from France, everywhere really. And then during my time there as a cheesemonger, people kept asking me why it was a lot easier to find European cheese in Australia as compared to Aussie cheese in Australia, and I had no answer.
Yeah.
So I started my research and I found that no one was actually championing Australian cheese. And even if shops were having Aussie cheese, it was mostly things that are mass produced and they weren't that great. And even if they were having artisanal, good quality Aussie cheese, it was only about, say, 20 to 30% of their overall range, right? No one was exclusively championing Aussie cheese. And I saw that as an opportunity. And, being an outsider, being a non-Aussie, and you kind of appreciate the things that you do not have from back home. And you develop a really beautiful understanding and appreciation for things that you have here. And that's what happened to me. And I said, you know what? If I want to do this, I'm going to put where, my money is and just go for it. Champion this, being the first one. And it's not easy. But, it's a slow progress, but we'll get there eventually.
I absolutely love that. It always fascinates me that we've got this incredible produce in Australia, across the board, and we still import so many things from overseas. And you're right, cheese is one of them. Like we all know the famous cheeses that are imported, the Rockfords and the Comtes and the Gorgonzola.
We just had pussy vision. A cat just walked across the screen.
That was so good.
Oh dear.
Yes, you were saying.
Yeah, so we all know those international cheeses, the Comtes, the Gorgonzolas, the Talagios of the world.
100%.
But Aussie cheeses, are they as good as international cheeses? Why does everyone go for these internationals?
I think one of the reasons could be, it's marketing. First of all, the French have done an amazing job, marketing their produce. And rightly so. They have had hundreds and hundreds of years of experience and history in cheese making. And they are very passionate and very nationalistic when it comes to their produce. Coming again, sorry. I would like to use the example of the wine industry in Australia. Cheese currently is where Aussie wine was about 20 years ago. No one wanted our wines. No one wanted our wines until something happened, and now the world wants our wine. I think this is what happened right now. I mean, with French cheeses, European cheeses, they've had hundreds of years of experience and history. So when they do come here, we do get a bit. I think it's the ego in us that, oh, look at me, I can afford or I can buy this amazing French cheese. I'm so frou-frou, I'm like special. So I think that is part of it, and also because there's not enough outreach, there's not enough education on good artisanal Australian cheese. Really. The industry is still really, really young. I believe artisanal Australian cheese has only started to grow in the last 10 years or so. Like now we have a lot more options, a lot more cheese makers coming up. And recently we also just have our first ever cheese making school in Castlemaine.
Oh, wow,
so
cool.
we have actually brought in an internationally world-renowned cheese educator and maker to teach the upcoming cheese makers in Australia, and also to upgrade the skills of current existing cheese makers that we have. So I think, yes, right now it's still a bit challenging. It's still not as big as the French and the Europeans, but give us about 5 to 10 years. I'm pretty sure we'll be up there. And about Aussie cheese being as good as European, I 100% agree. We have won many international awards, really. Say, for example, Berry's Creek. I believe you bought the Riverine Blue for your birthday party, Elise. I think one of their cheeses won the Gold Award at the recent International Cheese Awards in Spain. So we are up there. We just do not know it yet. And it's such a shame. And it's funny that this brown Singaporean Asian person is trying to tell Aussies that, hey, we are actually really good. And I hope people can see more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think maybe, is one of the struggles, like, a gorgonzola. So you'll go for a gorgonzola. But if you're wanting an equivalent Australian blue that is like that, I guess, what do you look for? Is there equivalent names? I would imagine, is there restrictions in terms of what you can call cheeses, like your champagne?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I think right now we are going through a bit of a challenge with regards to naming cheese in Australia. So there are certain names that we cannot ever use, like Parmigiano Reggiano, Manchego. We can't use those. Are all protected here, right? So the conversation is: should we, as Aussies, should we be making replicas of those cheeses, or should we be creating our own brand of cheese and our own type of cheese? And that is something that we are seeing a lot more of. Again, I'm going to use the example of Long Paddock in Castlemaine. They created this particular cheese, which is like a hybrid of a raclette and a gouda. And it's something that you can't find anywhere else. And it's stunning. Or another one, the Prom country in Gippsland, they created, I think it's a world's first, raw milk sheep's cheddar. Try Googling that. You cannot find that. So these are the things that, it's so amazing that we can do it. We are not bound by any sort of laws, restrictions, history, all of that crap, right? We can do whatever we want here. And I think we should just focus on that. If you want a gorgonzola, buy your Italian gorgonzola. But why not give all these new hybrids, new types, new categories a chance? And we are doing it here. How amazing is that?
I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
that
it's amazing.
So incredible.
Yeah.
I definitely think we should champion our own varieties rather than trying to just ride on the coattails of other brands or names and just replicating. We've got such a great opportunity here to do our own thing.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Yeah.
I'm imagining you've met a lot of cheesemakers.
Yes, I have.
And in your travels, what do you think has drawn people into cheese making? What seems to be a common denominator amongst people you buy cheese from?
Funny enough, there's actually a lot of ex-corporate people in cheese making and cheesemongering. Yeah, I was ex-corporate. There's a few. I know there's a finance person who's making cheese, ex-finance person making cheese in South Australia. There was a former marketing director and a lawyer in Queensland. I think people just got sick of the grind and they want to do something that involves art as well as science. I think cheese making is like making dessert. You can't just add stuff to it. I think making a savory dish, you can kind of wing it. But with cheese, I was naive enough before coming into cheese industry that I thought it was so easy just adding cheese and rennet and salt. But it's the science behind it which is quite fascinating. And also combining it with the art of flavor and art of cultivating molds is very intriguing for most people. Just imagine, cheese starts off with milk, right? A liquid. And then after a few months or a few weeks, it becomes a solid. It's kind of like a magician, isn't it? How fascinating is that?
It is so magic, isn't it?
It's magic, yeah.
Why do you think cheese makes people so happy? You mentioned before you're a feeder. You want to feed anyone that comes up to the right stall at the market.
Yes.
That you want to make people happy. What do you think it is?
Well, first of all, I think cheese shares similar compounds like crack cocaine. And I assume crack cocaine makes people happy, right? So that's one. And I think too is that I think cheese is, with regards to Australia, our culture is normally cheese eaten with family, with friends, at a party, in a gathering. You don't normally hear people eating cheese by themselves, as a meal. It's not really a thing we do here. It's compared to France.
I think it's
good for you. Yeah. But I think it's more prevalent in France as compared to here. So it's that food association of cheese eating with family and friends. I think that makes you happy. I mean, at my shop specifically, we get a lot of people coming to my shop specifically for parties. Like you, Elise, I mean, you came to my shop and for a party, and that's what people want. And that's the association they get from eating cheese, and that's what makes it happy. And who does, I mean, honestly, dairy makes everyone happy, really, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is very luxurious, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Speaking of parties, so I know what cheeses I purchased for my 30th, and I'm wondering, Hakim, if you were to host a party, what cheeses would feature? If you could only choose, 3 to 5, what would be some of your top tips or top picks at the moment? Crowd pleasers too, I suppose.
Right. Well, I was just about to say, I mean, it depends on who I'm inviting, right?
Yeah.
All my friends love cheese, so that's a plus. I don't have any friends who do not love cheese, so that would be really hard for the friendship.
They're immediately out.
So with regards to my friends, I would say we would go for like the bold flavors. We love our bold flavors. I would go with this beautiful 4.5-year-old cheddar that we have from South Australia. It's like a party in your mouth. It's crumbly, it's salt crystals throughout, it's bitter, it's sweet, it's sharp, it's beautiful. Unfortunately, I don't think we had some when you were there, Elise. And then the other one I would have would be my favorite goat cheese in the entire world. It's a Holy Goat La Luna.
Oh, yeah.
Creamy, soft, like zesty, lemony with a piece of like crisp pear, stunning. I would also have the Riverine Blue, the Buffalo Blue, one of my favorites blue in the whole entire world. And I think one more thing, maybe like a semi-hard, like a grate of some type. Yeah, something nutty and sweet. Yeah, just to round it off. Yeah, and we are not fans of like paste and things like that. We normally love fruit for a cheese platter. Just because we find paste a bit too sweet and it kind of hides and distracts from the flavor of cheese. So fruit,
Yeah, beautiful. We actually had a friend of ours, Manoli, make a beautiful feijoa jam. Or I think her mum made it actually, and it wasn't too sweet at all. And that's what we had on our cheese platter, and it was divine with fresh pear also, of course.
Yes, of course.
And that buffalo blue was such a crowd pleaser because I find blue cheeses can sometimes be a little bit polarizing. You either love them or hate them. And they can be really full on.
They can be.
Whereas that buffalo blue was so beautiful and soft and creamy, and it didn't have that ammonia sort of overpowering flavor that you sometimes get with blues. It was stunning.
Yeah. I have a tip though for those people who are not fans of blue on how to train yourself to like blues. And this is what I did, right? Initially. So I got this idea from an old friend, and he's told me that grab yourself a piece of fruit toast, right? And you toast it in the oven, make it nice and crispy. You spread your blue, and then you drizzle a bit of honey or some honeycomb on it. And trust me, if you didn't like blue, you would love the whole combination and flavor profile. It's beautiful. And then eventually I remove the honey, and then I remove the toast, and I just eat the blue on its own. That's how I kind of trained myself to like blue.
I love beautiful. That.
Yeah,
I think
really
sweets go really well with cheeses. One of the things that I like is ginger nut biscuits with like a really creamy brie.
Yeah, stunning. Yeah,
I know that's probably weird, but it's so good. Like a sweet ginger biscuit with a nice creamy brie. It is the ultimate.
Yeah, I mean it's an indulgent for sure. Sometimes you just kind of wanna not have savory, and you want to have a cheese after dinner. And you need that sweetness to just counteract all of that savory, funky flavors of cheese. And ginger biscuits, yes, 100%. Honey, 100%. Port,
Oh, yeah.
yum, yeah, things like that.
Good.
Yeah, go for your life. Yeah.
Delicious.
I have another question for you in terms of like tips and tricks, because we like to cover that on this show. And I love that the name of your business is Ripe.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about whether a cheese is ripe, what does that mean? What are you looking for? How can you tell if it's ripe or not? And how do you tell if it's overripe?
Yeah. So I think the easiest, look, there are different versions of ripe for different types of cheese, right? I think the easiest one for someone to figure out would be a soft cheese. So unfortunately, a lot of shops these days, they are selling underripe cheese. So meaning that when you grab yourself a piece of cheese around and you press on it, it has a bit of resistance. It's still a bit hard. And that's when you know that it's not ripe at all. A ripe cheese should be nice and soft. It should also have a bit of an aroma to it, right? And when you open it up, when you leave it up, and again, the most important thing about cheese eating, before you eat, it needs to be let out of the fridge for at least an hour to let the cheese breathe, to let the cheese come to room temperature. And that's where the texture is amazing, the flavor blooms, right? So when you cut it open, it should be nice and soft. A proper traditional brie would have a bit of ooziness to it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And the flavor should not be just milky and salty. It needs to have a bit of funk. It needs to have a bit of mushroomy notes. It needs to have a bit of cauliflower notes to it.
Yes.
That's the sign of a properly ripe traditional brie. Yeah, and that's how you do it. And one of my challenges at the shop is to really, and again, I'm called Ripe. I need to sell ripe cheese to customers, right?
Yes.
And one of the challenges that we have is to manage that, right?
Yes.
And how we do it is that we bought ourselves a wine cooler, a wine fridge with proper temperature controls, and we age our white molds in the fridge. Because sometimes when we receive cheese from cheesemakers, they have about 4 weeks, before it's ready to be eaten. And that's if you store it in the fridge, it would take even longer for it to get ripe.
Oh, wow.
But if you store it in a properly controlled temperature with proper humidity, you can kind of manage it a lot better. So these days, all my customers are getting perfectly ripe soft cheeses, hopefully at least. And with regards to hard cheeses, it's all about the flavor profile. I mean, with cheddar sometimes, the 4.5-year-old cheddar that I spoke to you about earlier, it's when it gets very Vegemite on the rind, you know it's getting too much.
Okay.
Yeah. It is all about the color. You see, the color is getting too orange or too dark, it's too much. Or if it's getting a bit too pungent in the smell, the ammonia smell is getting a bit too overpowering, that's too ripe for anything really, for blues, for soft. And also, if you see molds on your white molds, if you see a mold other than, say, white or sometimes even orange, it's time. It's not good anymore.
It's bad molds. There's
It's
good
bad
molds
mold,
and
yeah.
bad molds.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
What are some of your storage tips? If people were to, so for example, I bought large wheels for the purpose of my birthday party. I like buying cheese by the wheel. I feel like it's generous and impressive on a cheese platter. And, not everything might get eaten. What should people do to appropriately store hard cheeses, soft cheeses, blue cheeses?
Right. Okay. So first of all, before we even tackle the whole storing of cheese, right, we're going to talk about the knives that you use to cut the cheese, especially if you plan to store it later. right? So make sure that the knives are not mixed between cheeses. Because just imagine, right? Because cheese is all molds and things like that. So if you use the same knife to cut a blue and then to cut a brie after, and then you wrap the brie, and when you store it in the fridge, I guarantee you the mold from that blue would be growing on your brie. So that's something to think about even before storing, right?
I'm gonna tell everyone off in the future when I see them do that.
Yes. So the other tip is that also, if you want to buy large wheels, only cut what you want to eat. Yeah, that's really important. So you're not kind of putting the whole wheel there, or if you want to put the whole wheel as like a feature, section it.
Yeah.
Right? So you have like sections of it on the board. So once you've done all of that, you want to store it. Never store it in plastic. Never. My shop, we would. So whenever a cheese leaves a shop to a customer, it's always wrapped in cheese paper. And the reason why we wrap it in cheese paper is because it has millions and millions of perforated tiny holes on it to allow air to kind of breathe, to allow the cheese to breathe, really. And that's quite important because when you wrap it in plastic, you trap all that air and moisture in the cheese, and that, unfortunately, it minimizes the quality of cheese the longer you keep it, right? Okay. However, if you do not have cheese paper, the next best thing at home is baking paper.
I was going to ask you that because I definitely don't have cheese paper at home.
Baking
I feel
paper.
it's something I might need to invest in.
Baking paper is the next best thing.
Perfect.
And the best place to store your cheese is in the vegetable crisper compartment.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I find the temperature in there is a lot more consistent because it has that flap that covers it. It creates this little sort of mini environment that is consistent for the cheese. I try my best to never put it in the door compartment. And you know why? Because I think what COVID has taught all of us is that we snack a lot.
Yes.
And we walk to the fridge a lot. So the more we open the fridge, the temperature in the door fluctuates, and that is not good for the cheese. So I tend to put it in a crisper and leave it there with my baking paper or cheese paper. Yeah. Yeah.
And just leave it in the paper. Let it sort of breathe.
Just
Don't have
let
it in a container or anything.
No, just leave it in there. Yeah. And in terms of the duration of how long you can store, it depends on the type of cheese. I highly recommend eating cheese, soft cheeses, especially eat it within 2 weeks. Don't store it any longer than that. Blue cheese, similar, 2 weeks, eat it as fast as you can. Hard cheeses, you can keep it for a long time. But if you do see mold on a hard cheese, do not throw away the whole cheese. Cut the mold and eat the rest.
I'm happy you said that.
Yeah.
That's definitely, that's something I've inherited from my family too. You just cut the mold off anything
Cut
and
the
then you
mold
can
and
eat it.
eat the rest. Do not chuck it out. What else? Oh, and never, ever freeze cheese.
Oh, I never have tried.
Never ever freeze cheese because I have a funny story. So this happened about 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago. There's this customer. She was so excited to get married. So she came to the shop. She wanted a cheesecake tower for a wedding, and she came specifically wanting a 4-tier tower, right? Oh, wow. And in the midst of her excitement, she ended up picking 8 different cheeses. So an 8-layered cheese tower. And wow. I went, sweetie, this is too much. You only have 100 people. This is like for 400 people. She's like, that's fine. I'm like, sure, it's your money. You do what you want. My advice is it's too much, right? So off she went with 8 wheels of cheese. Happy, had a wedding. 1 year later, she came back to the shop with her baby, newborn, and she said, oh my God, Hakim, guess what? I'm like, what? I still have your cheese from my wedding. I'm like, what do you mean? I've been freezing them.
Oh my God. Oh, wow.
I was like, what?
No.
I'm like, yeah. I hope they still taste good. I mean, could you imagine trying to eating tore out cheese? It's all like mushy and yuck.
It would be strange.
So I often have a like a grated pecorino or parmesan in the
That's
freezer.
fine.
That's fine. Okay.
That's fine. Yeah. That's the only thing you can freeze. Grated Parmesan or pecorino. I think that's fine. Because you're eventually going to cook with it, right? It's not going to melt anyway, so it doesn't matter. But could you imagine eating frozen blue or frozen...
Oh, like a triple cream. No way. It would the mouthfeel would be completely off.
Totally off.
It wouldn't be creamy and smooth anymore.
No.
Oh, imagine freezer burn on your cheese.
No.
It should never be. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think the only time you should be freezing cheese if you made it in an ice cream. I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
They did do that on Masterchef this week. They did a ricotta parfait. And I was interested how that would work with the ricotta cheese in a parfait and frozen.
I mean, I've made apple pie cheddar ice cream before.
Yum.
Ooh,
And I've made a triple cream honeycomb ice cream before as well. That is beautiful.
Yum.
It's
I
yum.
want that.
Yum.
Someone like you can do things like that. That's otherwise quite an expensive experimental process.
It is,
What about a savory dish?
I love, so I'm not sure you tried this in my shop, but one of my favorite things to do is putting cheese in my my pastry. So in my pie pastry.
Oh, yeah.
So I have this 5-year-old goat's cheese, which I grated in my pie pastry. So I use half butter or shortening and half of this cheese.
That's so much. I love that percentage. Oh.
And it makes for the most crumbly, just buttery pastry. And the flavor is so full of umami. If people always ask, what's in this? They always think it's in the filling, but it's not. It's actually in the pastry. And I find butter itself, although it's delicious, but I think it's such a wasted opportunity if you don't add flavor to the pastry. So that is like I love putting cheese in my pastry. Love it. Love.
Yum. What filling do you pair with that?
My favorite filling is mustard, leek, and chicken.
Oh, yum.
Yeah.
I'm
Goat's
hungry.
cheese buttery pastry. That sounds so good.
Yeah. That's my favorite thing to make with cheese, really.
Beautiful.
Beautiful, yeah.
Would you say it's sacrilegious for people to come to your shop and select a bunch of cheeses for a fondue? What's your opinion of that? Okay. And if they were to do that, what cheeses would you recommend?
I think fondue, I mean, again, let's just not make ourselves bound by traditions, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Right? Fondue in essence is just melted cheese, right? So why can't we just melt whatever cheese we want in it?
Yes.
Right?
True.
I mean, you can use a raclette, you can use a gruyere, you can use any of that Alpine style cheeses that melts beautifully, really. It all depends on the flavor profile that you want. And that's normally the first thing I ask. What flavor profile that you want?
Yes.
Okay. I need you to sell me something at your store because I'm going to come in. And I am the customer that wants to make a fondue with Australian cheeses. And I want to be dipping some of the beautiful mushrooms that we have in season at the moment into this fondue.
Yeah.
Some roasted mushrooms. I've got them on a stick and I'm dipping them into cheese. Hot, gooey cheese and mushrooms. What should I be dipping those mushrooms into?
All right. First of all, I think you need a base. And the base should be a gruyere, right?
Okay.
Nutty, a bit of sweetness there. And then another cheese called the smoko, which is a Alpine style cheese, which has been cold smoked. I think a bit of smoky, subtle smoky flavor with mushrooms go really well. And just for a bit of fun, there is another cheese. I can't remember the name, but it is a washed rind. You remove the rind, scrape off the insides, and then you kind of melt it all in this concoction. And that would give that mushroomy, funky flavor. And I think all those flavor profile combined, you have that nice nuttiness, a bit of subtle smokiness, and that mushroomy funk would go really nice with some mushrooms and a glass of Chardonnay.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there you go. We've got a wine pairing and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Hakim. We have absolutely loved talking with you.
Oh, good.
Thank you,
Yeah.
cheese nerd. We love you.
Yes. I could talk to you all day about cheese. I love how passionate you are and how knowledgeable you are.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Absolutely.
Absolute pleasure. And where can people find your cheese?
So you can find my cheese and my shop at the Dairy Hall, shop 41/42 at the Queen Vic Market, right?
Amazing.
So we do all Aussie and we also do cheese toasties. So our famous cheese toasty has 3 cheeses in there: mozzarella, cheddar, a bitter blue, and our secret caramelized leeks between buttered sourdough and a side of pickles. And that's our the original, the OG. People come, we sell hundreds of that every week. But starting next week on Saturday, I'm not sure if you've heard, but it's our toasty that went absolutely viral last year. It's Melbourne's most truffle toasty.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
I need to come to Melbourne.
So it has.
I'm in Melbourne, Hakim. I'll see you there.
Yes.
Do you deliver them to Brisbane?
No, I don't, unfortunately.
Oh.
So it has about 12 grams of freshly shaved truffles in it, with cheese and truffle honey and truffle salt. And last year we sold about 5,000 during lockdown.
What?
And it went viral. It went viral on TikTok, on Instagram. We were written up in the UK. It just went nuts. So starting Saturday is coming back.
Beautiful.
Oh my God. There you go. I love that.
Saturday morning is planned for me. I'm putting it in my diary.
I'm booking my
can
flights.
I just say, do not come this Saturday. I expect it to be really busy.
Don't come now, he says.
Don't come this Saturday. I mean, look, if you want to come, just make sure that you pre-order on our website. Pre-order because if you come, because like last year we were sold out there was one day we were sold out by 11 a.m.
Wow.
We sold about 100 by 11 a.m.
Okay.
It was just nuts. So go to our website, pre-order if you really want to come. That's the best way. Then you can you can be guaranteed of a toasty.
Okay, beautiful.
Unbelievable. I'm booking my flights right now. I'll be there on Sunday.
The cheese school in Castlemaine sounds like an absolute good time, doesn't it, Scotty Bagnall?
Oh, yes. I've always wanted to make proper cheese. It's something that is not relatively easy. I think you would be the same as me. Make ricotta all the time. Ricotta is one of the easiest cheese you could possibly make because you don't need any special ingredients. You just need a saucepan, some milk, vinegar or lemon juice, and away you go. You've got beautiful ricotta. But other cheeses, I wouldn't know where to start to make a brie or a cheddar or, any of those, mozzarella. How do you make it stringy? I think there's lots of special tools and ingredients that you need. Have you ever made anything apart from ricotta?
Well, if you can make ricotta, you can make ricotta salata. And with that hard ricotta, you need to dry it out in the fridge. And that's something that Nonna has made forever. It's something her mum made as well. And ricotta never goes off in our household because you let it dry out in the fridge and then it becomes a grateable cheese.
Really?
Yes.
I've never tried that.
Traditionally, you have that with pasta alla norma, which is the eggplant sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how about it? But in terms of other cheeses, I haven't tried. I mean, I've made junket. Is junket a cheese?
Yeah. I was obsessed with junket as a kid. Can I tell you, that was my favorite thing. I probably had junket maybe 5 out of 7 days a week. We'd have these little junket tablets that would come in a box, and each tablet had a different flavor. So there was like strawberry and chocolate and I don't know what, vanilla. So you'd choose the flavor and you just crush it, add hot milk to it, and you get this beautifully set junket. Oh, it's so good. Food trends. Like, what happens with food trends? I always find that fascinating. Like, growing up, junket was a thing. Everyone ate junket, but I can guarantee you now, I don't even know. I've never seen it in the shops. Like, probably people don't even know what that means.
Oh, God, no. The trend now is to do the whole hop, jump, skip and twirl from your corporate life into fully fledged cheese making. Have you ever spoken to a cheesemaker?
No.
Have you ever thought to ask a cheesemaker about the regulations involved in cheese making?
No.
Have you ever pondered over the barriers to cheese making that might create challenges to making the beautiful cheese that we like to eat?
Look, I have actually. That's an interesting question. I think we need to talk to a cheesemaker.
We are joined by the wonderful Burke of Prom Country Cheese. Burke, thank you so much for joining us. Our first question, of course, is the invitation for you to please introduce yourself, your company, and what drew you to cheese making.
Okay, well, yes, I'm the founder and head cheesemaker at Prom Country Cheese. We're down in South Gippsland, just sort of 20 minutes from the coast down the Inverloch and about an hour and a half from Melbourne. And so we've got a farm down here where we're, with my wife Bronwyn, we're milking sheep on the farm and processing all that milk into cheese on site on the farm.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
That's pretty amazing. So you milk the sheep and make the cheese all in the one spot. Is that normal?
It's not that common in Australia. You've kind of got to be pretty small to be able to do everything together. Yeah. But we're actually working with another dairy farmer who milks the cows. That's Daniel. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of work together. He milks the cows, we milk the sheep, and we work together making the cheese. So it's a real sort of team effort. But originally I got into cheese making through my family. My father started making cheese about 25 years ago. And we were farmers at the time, and after a little while, my parents finally convinced me to try cheese making, and there was something that kind of piqued my interest, just sort of having no idea where cheese came from and how it was made. But as I got into it, I fell in love with the process because it all made sense to me being a farmer. Instead of growing things in soil, we're growing things in milk. And really things just behave the same way like that. So it kind of, it all makes sense to me.
Beautiful.
That is amazing. I bet the cheese industry has changed a lot in 25 years. Have you had any perspective on that? Like growing up with your parents, cheesemakers, have you seen the cheese industry develop? We were just talking about this with Hakim about, Australian cheese finally starting to take off and get recognised, and we're used to all these international cheeses. Have you seen the cheese industry change in Australia over the last 25 years?
Yeah, I guess my father was a bit of a trailblazer there with European-style cheeses. He was kind of ahead of his time. Back then, we knew what we wanted to do, and we were sort of blazing ahead with the specialty cheeses that way. Yeah. But as we've gone over the years, there's been more and more people who've been able to educate as to the difference between a plain cheese with not much flavour and a traditionally made cheese that gets stronger as it ripens. And we've also followed that journey with changing from initially educating people about the benefits of of goat cheese when goat cheese wasn't very widely known. It sort of took us about 10 years to get that fairly mainstream.
Oh, wow.
And then as we started milking our sheep about 14 years ago, we started that journey again of explaining to people that you can actually get milk from sheep and it makes the best cheese anywhere.
Amazing.
So that's just brought through by lots of face-to-face cheese tastings and talking to people like this as to what's out there.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, for our listeners who aren't aware of what the country is like down in South Gippy, could you describe what it's like where you live and the kind of geography where your animals are grazing?
Yeah, so we're in the sort of western end of South Gippsland, just as the coastal plains sort of rise up into the hills, and so we're up in the hills here, but actually our farm's in a valley. We've got the Foster Creek that runs through our farm. We've got some parts of the farm in the hills and some on the creek flats, and it's very deep soils. They're kind of the soils where the giant earthworms grow because the topsoil's so deep. And because of that, we have that and our rainfall, we have green grass most of the year round, and so that's really good for producing grass-fed milk that we don't need to feed them on grain. It's just pasture, and we're also able to run our farm organically, so we're certified organic now as well.
Wow, that's an incredible feat. Congratulations.
That is amazing.
It does take some time to figure out how to farm organically and keep your animals healthy at the same time. And it's good to having a little community of organic farmers which help you with advice and all that sort of thing.
Do you think that affects the flavour of your end product?
Definitely, milk quality is the most important thing in making cheese. And yeah, I guess when we're following the process all the way through from the pasture to milking and making the cheese and then maturing the cheese and serving it to people, we like to know that everything that's gone into that milk is completely natural and that we're not putting anything into the milk that shouldn't be there or that shouldn't be in our food. So it's particularly important when we're making our raw milk cheese that we're preserving as much life in the original milk as possible, because all of that life in the milk eventually develops through the cheese as it matures and influences the flavours and textures of the cheese.
Yeah. Speaking of flavours and textures, so Scotty and I recently got to try your Venus Blue, and I'm wondering if you could walk us through your cheese range. What kinds of cheeses are you making, and what's the scope of the potential of your cheese making?
We make a fairly large range for a small producer, from soft cheeses to hard and, of course, the blue. We never used to make blue cheese for about the first 10 years. We were a bit sort of afraid of the blue mould and what it would do to the rest of our cheese. But as we developed a system for it to work, and the blue cheese had their end of the building, separate airspace to everything else, then things work well. So the other thing is with sheep milk, it's very seasonal and we only have milk for 9 months of the year. So while we have fresh milk, we like to celebrate all the fresh cheeses, but when we don't have any milk, we also like to have cheese the rest of the year as well. So through the spring is when we get the majority of our milk, and that's when we make a lot of our hard cheeses that last us all year round. So we have 5 or 6 different hard cheeses, and lately the focus has been on making raw milk cheese with our in the hard cheese category. That's our Moyera Reserve. That's matured a minimum of 5 months, but usually around 12 months that we keep it to age. So the cheese from 2020 is just finished coming through through now. So that was kind of 14 months old, and we're just going on to new season raw milk cheese, which is about 6 months old.
Oh, wow. How do you know when it's ready? Is it just do you just keep tasting it until are you looking for a particular flavour or texture or colour?
Yeah, everything really. You can just tell when you cut a cheese a little bit young, and you kind of already know that it's going to be a little bit young just through experience. And it's a nice, pleasant cheese, but it just doesn't have the wow factor. And that's particularly relevant with the Venus Blue as well. At 3 to 4 months, or even 4 months, it's quite a pleasant cheese. It looks like a blue cheese, but there's just something missing from it that you have in the 6-month-old Venus Blue, where the texture really starts breaking down, and all the enzymes in the curds have an opportunity to do their work. And it kind of changes from being a blue cheese towards something else, something of its own. It becomes more about the reaction in the curds and less about the blue mould. So the blue mould plays a role early on in the development of the cheese, and after it's sort of done its job breaking the curds down, it's not as relevant anymore. So you've still got that background flavour of the blue mould without it dominating those sharp flavours that blue can create sometimes, and being too overwhelming on the blue side.
Being a cheesemaker, is it a constant experience of learning as you go? And what has that learning process been like for you?
Yeah, I've been a cheesemaker now for 20 years, and I still make mistakes every time I make cheese, and hopefully they're just little mistakes that you can minimise. But the fact is that milk is always different. Every batch of milk we put in the vat is slightly different, and the environment's different, the weather's different, which affects the humidity in our cellars, so things ripen differently. And I guess the key to all that is really just being super observant. You learn to read what the milk's doing, pay attention to how things are developing, and I guess all we're really doing is guiding the milk hopefully in the direction we want it to go, or to maximise its potential of how good it can end up.
Yeah, we were talking about terroir, like you talk about in wine. In cheese, obviously, there must be something very similar, that the milk from that day comes from a particular animal that's been eating a particular section of grass. So there must be a lot of differences in terms of the milk that you work with and the outcome that you get from the cheese.
Yeah, that's particularly prevalent highlighted in the raw milk cheese, because everything that was in the milk is coming through in the cheese. And so you really get to see the difference between milk that's had that pasteurising step and milk that's just let to go to its full potential. So and you can definitely taste that in the cheese. From the raw milk cheese is just so much broader in its flavours and its aftertaste as well. And that's why we decided to just call our raw milk cheese Moyara, because that's the place where it comes from, and that's the taste of our valley here.
I love that.
And yeah, that same milk taken somewhere else and made in a different location will end up differently. Or if we bring somebody else's milk here and make it here, it will taste different as well. So yeah, it is quite unique that way.
I think that's amazing. Is there any legislative requirements or restrictions in terms of making cheese with raw milk? I know there's lots around selling raw milk just as raw milk.
Yeah, I guess there's a reason why we're the only ones in Victoria that are doing it, and there's only 2 of us in Australia that are making completely raw milk cheese that hasn't been heated in any part of the process, because it is something that food regulators are worried about. They're nervous about the process. and I guess they're not cheesemakers, so they don't sort of fully understand the cheese-making process of how you're fermenting a food, you're adding salt to it, you're drying it out, and all these things help contribute to the safety of it. And so, for that reason, it took us about 2 years to develop the paperwork to be given permission to make raw milk cheese, to get a license for that specifically. And there's quite a process in every step in the dairy. Before the milk even arrives into the cheesery, we have to know that the milk's perfectly clean and safe, and then testing the young cheese that we've just made, and then testing the cheese again before we release it. So it's quite expensive process as well, but we can be really confident that the cheese that we're releasing is perfectly safe to eat.
Amazing. I love that so much, because that's how it's been done for centuries. And, we've introduced all of these processes that really destroy a lot of those beautiful features and benefits from, natural products like this.
Yeah, that's right. There's so many things in the milk that we don't even know what they do, but we know it all contributes to diversity, and that diversity of food that's going into our bodies is making us more resilient to what's out there in the real world.
Absolutely. I love that. I suppose law can be very restrictive, and I think Victoria is known to be one of the most restrictive states in terms of our food safe policies, and it's quite a testament to you and your team that you were able to jump over some of those hoops and be able to create a raw milk cheese here in Victoria. So thank you so very much, Burke. That's definitely a big thank you from me as a enthusiastic consumer.
Well, we figured that somebody had to do it, and we're perfectly positioned to be able to do it, having our own animals on site. We're in complete control of the quality of our milk, and that's really foremost in the requirements for doing that.
Burke, if people were to try and find your cheese, other than ripe at the Queen Victoria Market, where could we find Prom Country cheese?
Yeah, mainly at the specialty delis. There's another one called Cane Scene Fromagerie in the South Melbourne market, and Harper Blom in Brunswick. Similar kinds of delis and the little smaller supermarkets and that. But, you never know where it might sort of pop up. But actually, this weekend we're serving our cheese at a local food and wine festival in Lock, which is just on the South Gippsland Highway, not far from here.
Nice.
And we've got our cellar door open this weekend as well, which is kind of a monthly thing where people can visit the farm.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Burke. It's been an absolute pleasure to discuss cheese with you and to learn about your beautiful property and your beautiful cheese.
Thank you so much.
Can talk about it until the sheep come in.
That's good. I'm so proud to be Victorian. How about that? We're the second state to have a raw cheese maker.
That is so impressive. And, to have that initiative to go through that process, which would not have been easy to get that certified. Good on Burke. I think that is amazing.
Scotty, let's have a little bit of a show and tell segment, shall we?
I'm excited about this week.
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
I don't know. Okay.
All right, go.
I'm too excited.
Woo-hoo.
Mine's like two things, but they relate to each other. I wonder if I can show you this thing. Yeah, I can. I'm going to hold this up and not show you like the top of it. And you've got to guess what's in my box.
We're back to that what's in the box segment from earlier in the season of Cream, Eggs and Jam. This is a larger box than what you have presented in the past, and it sounds like it's a little bit rattly. Now, it looks like a wooden box. It has a bit of a like a Masterchef mystery box kind of vibe about it. And it sounds like there are metal things in there. What have you acquired, Scotty Bagnall? I don't know. I can't. I have no idea. Is it cheese related?
This is cheese related, and you stole my thunder in our interview with Hakim.
Really? Knives. Oh, hello. Fondue. Hello.
This is
look
an
at this set.
original 1970s fondue set that my very good friend Anne gave me.
Oh. Hello, little beauty.
Look
It's
at
got
this
flowers.
gorgeous little pot.
Oh, is it terracotta with and
No,
yellow?
this one is a metal, so it's like an aluminium. I've got like a stoneware one as well, but this one is this beautiful like mustard yellow sort of color with 70s inspired flowers around the outside. It sits on a little stand. It's got the matching sort of handle and your timber little fondue. What do you call these things? Spikes? Is this got a technical name? It probably
Skewer?
does. Fondue skewer?
Stabby thing?
Stabby thing.
Yeah. With your stabby thing. No, with your preference of cheeses for a fondue, do you deviate at all from some of the suggestions that Hakim gave us?
Well, this is a very good question, Elise, for my part 2 of Show and Tell.
Oh, it's a whole book on the topic.
This is Fondue Cookery by Alison Burt. It is also an original 1970s masterpiece. You'll probably find this one at Books for Cooks, I'm sure. And
Really?
it has like a whole thing about all of the different fondues and cheeses. Interestingly, I'm very surprised the traditional fondue, there was a little bit of the Swiss cheese fondue from which all of the other fondues are derived is the traditional Neuchâtel fondue from Switzerland. And this original fondue recipe has got some very interesting ingredients. 1 clove of garlic, 1.5 cups of dry white wine, lemon juice, 2 cups of Emmenthal. Emmenthal
Is
cheese?
that another cheese?
It's another cheese. Emmenthal. 2 cups of grated Gruyere cheese, tablespoon of corn flour. This is random. 3 tablespoons of Kirsch.
Sure.
Interesting. White pepper, grated nutmeg, paprika to taste.
Wow.
What an interesting combination. So I do like my cheese fondue with white wine, that like wininess and the melted cheese and having a little bit of that acidity and like the herbal notes of the wine, I think work really well in a good gooey cheesy fondue. But the introduction of the kirsch is very interesting. I can't quite imagine that like cherry, because kirsch is something that you would use in a black forest cake traditionally. I use kirsch all the time in black forest cakes. It's got a very strong cherry flavour. It's so bizarre, isn't it? This is another food trend, like fondue cooking. Again, in like the 70s, you would have fondue parties regularly. Yeah. And it was such a big part of food culture. In like, I obviously didn't experience it in the 70s, but I know a lot of people that talk about it. And I know how popular it was, but then it's just disappeared. No one does fondue anymore. Why?
Okay, there is a shop called Milk the Cow.
Oh,
right? There are 2 of them here in Melbourne. One's on Lygon Street and the other one, I think it's around St Kilda Way. You can get cheese flights there. And if you do not get a cheese flight, you might order single serves of cheeses. You might order from the cheese fridge or cabinet, I should say. Or you can order fondue. And they have elevated fondue. Their fondue really allows whatever cheeses that they're using to really be appreciated. It's not like a mixing hot pot magosh of disaster. It is everything that you want fondue to be and more. You've got beautiful dipping options of local sourdough.
Yum.
And look, for me personally, I want crudité. I want young baby vegetables to dip into fondue. I want young fresh radishes, maybe a little like some fennel would be lovely, and sugar snap peas. What do you want, Scotty? What's in your dipping selections?
Oh, see, I like to have a savoury and a dessert fondue. I think it's very important. If you're having a fondue party, you need to do both. You've not done both? You need to have savoury and then a dessert. You follow up with the dessert fondue.
Is the fondue for dessert also cheese or is it chocolate?
Oh, no, chocolate.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Or custard.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Here we go. Yum.
A bit of a chocolate custard fondue with some mud cake that you just like dip in the custard and fruit cake, strawberries. I immediately just go to sweet because I'm such a sweet tooth. But little cubes of fun things in a dessert fondue is so good.
Oh, yeah.
Cakes,
I love little
biscuits.
cubes of fun things.
Such fun. I've now got my fondue set out, so I'm going to have to hold a fondue party, I think.
Yes, please. All right, let me do a little bit of a show and tell, Scotty. Mine is also a 2-part piece and a 2-piece feed. It complements Hakim's discussion of using cheese in pastry. We're going to put up a little photo right about now if you're watching on YouTube. And these are monkey biscuits that I recently made up at the meat room in Kilmore where I sometimes do some casual work. And these are my take on a monkey biscuit. They are cheddar and apple flavoured. So there's
yum.
a cheddar cheese in the sweet shortbread or I suppose it's a sweet biscuit recipe that I've added cheddar to. And then sandwiched in the middle of these 2 thin biscuits is apple butter.
Apple butter? What is apple butter?
Yeah. Apple butter is apple that you have reduced. So you have cooked the hell out of it and kept cooking it, and you've turned 7 kilos of apple into one small container of this thick black caramel that is just intensely apple flavoured and spreadable.
Wow. So is the apple like, is it pureed or cubed or juiced or what is
the first time I made it, I peeled and cored my apples, chopped them, added a little bit of water, a little bit of sugar, apple cider vinegar and some spices, and then had that in the oven all day on low, stirring intermittently. The second time I made it, I did a little bit more research, and you don't need to peel your apples. That's a waste of time.
Really?
Especially when you're working with so many apples. So this is a recipe if you have a glut of apples. And of course, what goes well with apples and cheese, they go well together. They're made for each other. Someone else that puts apple and cheese together is my favourite lady in the world, Nigella Lawson.
Yes.
My second part of my show and tell is from How to Be a Domestic Goddess by Nigella, one of her earlier books, and it is her double apple pie. And Nigella puts cheddar in her crust.
What?
It's not something advertised within the title of the recipe. If you have this book at home, it's her recipe for double apple pie. And in the description of the recipe, she says, the notion of putting cheddar in the pastry of an apple pie is not a new one, but I was pleased all the same to see how well it worked. Okay. Of course it works. It's like seasoning with umami.
Yeah. What sort of cheese? Does she say what sort of cheese to use?
Just cheddar.
Cheddar.
And sometimes I typically always have a tasty cheese in the fridge because toasties, you need, I don't know, it's a rule. In my upbringing, you always have a block of tasty in the fridge. And so sometimes I've just used tasty cheese in the crust. But if you have a nice cheddar kicking about, particularly after a cheese board and it's the cheese that's been left behind, give it a grating and pop it into your short crust or your rough puff or your sweet biscuit dough. I'm really interested by what Hakim said. He said he does a 50%, half the amount of butter, half the amount of fat is butter and half the amount is cheese. So I'm going to really up my cheese in pastries that I make soon, just to really test how far you can push it.
I'm very surprised at a 50% ratio of cheese. But I want to try that too. I'm definitely going to give that a crack.
Yum! Beautiful. It's been lovely talking cheese with you, Scotty Bagnall.
Oh, I do love cheese.
Let's have a fondue party.
Even though I'm lactose intolerant.
I know. I might be a little sensitive myself, but I hope you've enjoyed listening, dear listener. And if you have a little cheese-related story, if you know a cheese maker, if you know a cheese that we should taste, please let us know. Be in touch. Contact us via Instagram or via our email address. We'd love to hear from you.
And please go on to our YouTube channel, subscribe, comment, like our episodes, give us some feedback. You can catch us on all of your favorite podcast channels. Until next week.
You've been listening to Cream, Eggs and Jam.
Bye.
See ya. You've been listening to Cream, Eggs and Jam. I'm Elise Pulbrook, and you can find me on Instagram at Elise_foodperson.
And I'm Scott Bagnall, and you can find me on Instagram at @SSBagnall. If you'd like to send us your show and tell, you can email us scottyandελise@gmail.com.
Or if you'd like the visual experience of this podcast, you can find us on YouTube at Cream, Eggs and Jam.
Have a great day.
Happy baking!